My name is Sherry Lava, Research Director at IDC, and today I'm going to talk to you about unlocking the exponential business value of EDA. And what I'm going to present is results from the IDC Event-Driven Automation Survey sponsored by Solus, which showed a pretty clear benefit between EDA maturity and what kind of organizational benefits businesses are getting from advanced EDA. Before we dive in, let me tell you a little bit more about me. In general, in my research area, I'm looking at things like event-driven automation, API management, integration tools. That's really all the scope of my research, and then broader enterprise automation as well. Before stepping into a research role, I was a consultant for many years, first implementing business applications for organizations. But as we tried to help organizations get a fuller picture of their business, I moved into the information management practice because it was clear that getting data around the organization and out of the application silos they were in was a major challenge for most organizations, and still is today. So I have over 20 years of experience in this area, and I'm a certified change management practitioner as well, meaning that while I also understand the technology, I'm also have a lot of experience in helping organizations understand what else besides the technology they have to do to be successful. Now, there's a fair amount of interesting findings in this research study that we did together, and we won't have time to cover them all today, including findings that looked at the data from different angles and industries, regions, those sorts of things. But if you want to learn more, there is an IDC info brief sponsored by Solus, and we'll make that available in the chat during the presentation. Today, however, I'll cover survey highlights from these 5 areas of the survey, which included EDA adoption, the prominent use cases that we see either being planned or already deployed, the benefits of EDA and how those change over maturity, the organizational considerations to keep things moving at a steady pace, and the key success factors to help you in your journey with event-driven automation. So let's dive in. Now, to qualify for this study, organizations had to at least be planning to implement event-driven automation in the next 24 months, or already have some event-driven automation in the organization today. We spoke with large enterprise organizations with 1,000 or more employees, and we heard from IT respondents across a number of levels in the organization, from doer to middle manager to C-suite executives. We also looked at organizations from a broad number of countries. So the bottom line is we had a strong global representation and a strong focus from IT with those most familiar with EDA. And to preview the results for a minute, I'll tell you that at the end of the survey, we asked a question, and what they told us was that nearly 2/3, which is about 60% of organizations that we surveyed, said EDA is a critical technology to becoming a real-time responsive enterprise. So one of the first key takeaways from this survey was that EDA is going mainstream, but adoption is fairly uneven at this point. Just over half of the folks who qualified for the survey were either in the planning stages, and that meant they were planning to implement EDA in the next 24 months, or they had some EDA deployed, either a single use case, but it wasn't part of a deliberate strategy. And we called that group incidental. We had about another 25% that we put in the centralized bucket. This group was characterized by having more than one use case, maybe some team centralization, but when it came to deploying EDA, it wasn't necessarily thought of as the de facto standard or business as usual. And we called that group centralized. And then the third group we had was a group that was characterized by having multiple use cases of EDA deployed, a centralized team, and a lot of the supports in place to really kind of make EDA the de facto standard when moving data through the organization. And we called this group advanced. And we're going to refer back to these groups throughout the presentation because some of the results we found where we made this claim about exponential business value come directly back to how many use cases were deployed and how experienced folks were with setting up for their EDA deployments. So next we asked what use cases were planned. And, what we found was that there's quite a wide variety. IoT devices and supporting decision-making were some of those largest already implemented use cases. But when we looked at the ones that were sort of tops in both already implemented or considering in the next 24 months, it really spanned a number of different things. IoT was obviously still up there, but so was distributed applications and data sharing. And in fact, most organizations plan to implement at least 2 to 3 EDA use cases in the next 24 months. And those that had already implemented had probably implemented at least 2. So what does this tell us? This tells us that folks are planning to deepen their investments, and they are picking use cases, but the use cases don't tell the whole story. And the reason I say that is when you look at something like application integration, it's close to the bottom in terms of planned use cases. And yet, many of these use cases will end up supporting application integration, even if that's not the specific motive at the top of the list. So for example, published IoT data may be initially consumed to trigger alerts, but over time it's consumed by business and analytics system to support decision-making or trigger automated actions, such as something has gone offline or a delivery is not going to be available, and someone can take immediate action and plan to correct the issue. So the use cases become really important and tie pretty directly into the benefits. So let's talk about benefits for a minute. Keeping in mind those use cases, we see that there's both business and technical benefits. And what's interesting here is that when organizations talk about EDA, they often first talk about the very technical benefits, particularly in that incidental phase. And there are definitely strong technical benefits. We see that here, right? We're providing more real-time data to the organization. That's great tech benefit. We're, introducing more event reusability, which is reducing the need for those redundant point-to-point integrations. Huge technical, reduces technical debt, huge technical benefit. But those technical benefits don't sit there alone. Some of them translate directly into business benefits. And then there are also business benefits that result from just the organization having access to more real-time data. And one of the top ones we saw was that gets realized probably the soonest in an EDA journey is the increase in employee productivity. That actually comes pretty early into the EDA maturity lifecycle, even in the incidental and early centralized phases. And the reason is because when the organization starts to have up-to-date synchronized data available everywhere, the applications and the employees both can become more responsive to threats and opportunities in shifting demand, which we see today. Now, when we think about all of those benefits, the next question somebody starts to ask is, well, what's the return on investment like with EDA? And the answer is, it grows pretty exponentially over time. When we look at this slide, we see that at the incidental phase, when we asked, how would you best characterize the return on investment? In the early stages, it's kind of where you'd expect. 37% were saying, hey, it meets or exceeds expectations. And that's actually really great in those early stages. But you have another group who are in the earlier parts of their journey that are saying, it's hard to figure out, it's too early to tell. And there are a lot of things that impact this, but you can see as organizations start to deepen the number of use cases and the supports in place for EDA, and it becomes more part of the way the organization does business, that return on investment grows pretty quickly to a 93% expectations being met rate in the advanced, and 38% of that is exceeding the expectations folks had. And why this is important is when you think back to that benefits slide, there were certain benefits that only became available as you started getting to that advanced stage because of those interdependent use cases coming together to provide so much more ability for the business to move faster. We see those on the right: reduced development times, improved customer experience, and improved regulatory compliance all start to emerge. So when we say that EDA has exponential business value, that's not hyperbole. We can see this in the data. So why is it exponential? Well, once you get to the advanced stage, the technology is better understood by technical teams. Your partners in the business, in line of business, actually start to see the impact of those benefits and increase their support. And then the interdependent use cases start to bear more fruit, which allows the organization to go faster. The bottom line here is that EDA is a strategy, not a single project, and its benefits compound with time and additional use cases. Now, to kind of take this a step further, and don't just take my word for it, one of the things we did at the end of the survey is we had an open-ended question where we asked organizations, how has EDA impacted your overall performance? And this is where things got interesting, because we noticed a very considerable difference between those responses to that question in the incidental phase versus the advanced phase. In the incidental phase, they mirrored a lot of what we saw in the last slide: too hard to tell, don't know yet, those sorts of things. But when we got to the advanced stage, it was very clear, and this is just a small sample of some of the quotes we had, but we'll go through them. The first we saw was EDA is the lowest cost to achieve higher profits and improve employee productivity. That's a pretty strong statement. So one of the first, and I mentioned that employee productivity was one of the first benefits organizations tended to get. And we also see some tactical performance improvements, like, hey, we can develop applications faster, and that's great. But there are deeper benefits we talked about that come from this. Let's talk about the third one. With the help of EDA, we can fundamentally change the way we interact with our clients. And this came out, as I said, for those advanced organizations, saying customer experience is one of the top benefits, because you can serve your customers better if you have real-time data. You can pivot. You can, when something goes wrong, you can manage expectations. You can look at another supplier. You can reroute. You can do what you need to do. If you know what's happening, you're alerted to it, then you can take action. And then the fourth one, it helps us grow our business and improve our efficiency. So if we think about some of what we were talking about with these interconnected pieces, if you have the same data flowing throughout the organization, those who are serving your customers have what they need. They don't need to go into multiple systems. They don't need to try and reconcile where the data is more accurate and correct and up to date, because it's flowing through the organization in a way that gives them confidence in the ability to serve correctly and do their jobs more efficiently. So those are the benefits. Let's talk about the things organizations need to be thinking about to keep that EDA strategy moving forward. And one of the biggest ones we saw in the survey was access to skills. And this was cited by organizations regardless of whether they were in incidental, centralized, or advanced maturity. So it's no surprise when we asked them what their top considerations were. The top 2 of 3 were the need for supportive and knowledgeable business partners. And what that tells us is getting access to skilled support is going to help the organization get to that those investment benefits faster and that return on investment. And why this is important is when we think about what drives success in a new initiative, there's usually 2 components that change management folks think about. They think about skill and they think about will. You have to be able to execute with the skill in order to get the benefit. And that's what this is saying. But the other half of that is the will. And so the other piece that we talked about as part of this is we asked folks, what did your change management approach look like? And to really get the kind of momentum that drives those benefits, you need a robust change management plan. And that's the other half, the will part of a success plan. Now, what was interesting here is we see that the most successful organizations said middle management support was critical in their change management plan. And one of the things we noticed is when we looked at the respondents by incidental versus advanced, the advanced organizations were more likely to cite middle management supports were a key part of their change management approach, versus those in incidental who were more likely to rely on not only less tactics overall, but they were more likely to rely on either a top-down or a bottom-up approach. And the problem is a top-down approach is important, not saying it's not, but it's where leadership gives messages. The bottom-up approach is where the folks who are executing the change need to actually deliver action. But the middle management in the middle is the group that's accountable for managing the doers and also accountable for communicating progress up to management. And if they don't have the right supports in place, which might be things like the right incentives, the right skills, the right access to skills, the right funding, the right business partners, they're not going to be able to execute as successfully, and the change is more likely to not succeed because they're the ones that are going to translate leadership messaging into action and help drive that action through their teams. So that part's critically important. So then what can we conclude about unlocking this exponential business value we've been talking about? Well, there are 5 key takeaways from the survey that lead you on the pathway to success with EDA. And the first is C-suite support from both line of business and IT, and it's critical during the incidental phase. What we found is that in that phase, the organizations to kind of get through that learning curve needed consistent support from both line of business and IT in order for everyone to keep the momentum moving forward. Second most important thing, IT needs to address technical complexity head on and be prepared for increasing complexity as EDA becomes more prevalent. And what we mean by that is not only the skill piece, what we talked about, increasing technical skills within the organization and centralizing the teams that support EDA, which was important in becoming an advanced organization. But the other piece that we noticed in the survey was that the technical challenges that incidental folks faced were different than the ones that those in advanced faced. And so understanding that the challenges will change as you implement more use cases and there are more interconnections is really important. The third thing is around communication and ensuring that even the technical benefits are communicated in a way that help create alignment between IT and business. Every technical benefit, such as developing faster, can be communicated as a business benefit. While you develop faster, we're able to introduce functionality faster that serves our customers better and keeps us more competitive. So it's important to keep thinking of those technical benefits in business terms so that it doesn't sound like EDA is only a technical architecture and not something the business needs to be thinking about. The fourth thing is implementing the right success measures and evolving those as the use cases proliferate. What we mean here is that in the incidental phase, a lot of the measures that are used and are appropriate are how much faster are we developing? How much simpler is it to get real-time data from across the business? That's great. But in the advanced stage, the metrics that advanced organizations are using is how much am I getting better customer experience as measured by customers? How much more productive are my employees? So those need to shift over time. The fifth thing, and can't say this enough, is accelerate your EDA implementation with the right supports, including external business partners and effective change management practices, because those two things are probably the two biggest predictors of success. And with that, I want to thank you for your time today. I hope you found this information helpful. And if you want to dive deeper into the results of the study, read the IDC info brief, Getting in Sync, Unlocking the Exponential Business Value of Real-Time Event-Driven Data Flows. And a link will be posted in the chat. Thanks so much.